Hello and welcome to Fiction at the Friary, our first event of 2022 on Sunday, 30th of January. We hope that by next month, on the final Sunday in February, we will actually be back live in the Friary Bar in Cork City because the news has been good so far. We're delighted to begin the year with a guest author from Cork City and also from Waterford, Catherine Kirwan. Myself and Danielle McLaughlin, my co-host, would like to thank our sponsors, the Arts Council, Cork City Council, the School of English at UCC, J. Rapp O'Mara Solicitors and Hogan Architects. And we'd also like to thank Mike Darcy of the Friary Bar. We look forward to seeing him again soon. And I'm going to hand you over to Danielle now to introduce our author.
We're absolutely thrilled that we have Catherine as our first guest author of 2022. Catherine Kirwan grew up on a farm in the parish of Hughes, County Waterford. She studied law at UCC and lives in Cork, where she works as a solicitor. Cruel Deeds is her second novel. It's published by Hachette Ireland. Catherine Ryan Howard has described Cruel Deeds as a propulsive mystery that feels both fresh and assured. And Andrea Carter has described it as pacey, gripping, and atmospheric. A cracking read. I also found Cruel Deeds gripping from the very first page to the last. It's really a compulsive read. I loved catching up again with solicitor Finn Fitzpatrick. Cruel Deeds is amazingly plotted, and that's something that I'm looking forward to asking Catherine about in a little while, just how she managed that amazing plotting. But first, I'm going to invite Catherine to kick things off by reading an extract from Cruel Deeds for us.
Thank you so much, both Danielle and Madeleine. I'm delighted to be here and only wish that it could be in the actual Friary Bar, but I'll be there at the end of February when hopefully normal service will resume, and I'll be there downstairs with my usual crew. I very much hope. I'm really looking forward to that, to have some bit of normality. But anyway, so I'm going to read from, there is a prologue, but this is the first page of the actual book, and it's the first time we meet Finn. And Finn is telling the story herself. You won't see it on a street sign, but us locals know. You have to look down when you're walking in Cork. Look down or fall victim to the traps this city lays for the unwary. The errant paving slab, the drain cover gone rogue, the vomit, and sometimes the blood. A vivid ruby trail when freshly shed, fading as it dries, melding with the caked-in grime on Patrick Street's pink footpaths, laid in a fit of long-vanished boom-time optimism, and by the look of them after 3 days without rain, never cleaned since. I was waiting for Davy Keenan by the front door of Brown Thomas, looking down, trying to resist the urge to pace, definitely not calling, even though he was late. 10 minutes late, then 12 minutes, then 15. Then I raised my gaze and glimpsed him at last, all 6'2" of him sauntering in my direction. Sandy hair and beard, powder blue soft cotton t-shirt, old jeans, scuffed brown suede shoes. I felt like I often feel when I see him, like the sun's come out and I might burn. Sorry, he said, but I'm here now, right? Half looking forward to it in a weird way. I sensed something in him that hadn't been there when he'd left my house that morning. A kind of nervousness, or it could have been excitement, and I badly wanted to ask why he was late. But I pride myself on not being needy. So I told myself that the why of it didn't matter and flashed him my second best smile. You're going to love her, I said. He smiled too, a neat, pretty one, and tucked a few strands of my long black hair behind my ears and wrapped his right arm around my shoulders. I'm 5'8", so we're a snug fit. We walked on in silence, settling into a familiar rhythm as we cleared the city centre. Hugging the river most of the way, we kept walking, and I thought about how often it went like this between us. The raised heart rate, the nearly conflict, the unasked question, the almost resolution. The benign version of a destructive pattern I'd known long before we'd met that I was doing my best to change. Only it turned out my best wasn't up to the job most of the time. After a while, Davy said, "It's always farther than you think." So that's the end of the opening chapter. And it turns out that where they're going is the Marquee. And they're going to a concert, and it's a Dolly Parton concert. Davy isn't a fan, but Finn is a huge fan, obviously. And Davy is deeply mistaken, obviously. But so anyway, we see them at the concert, and then afterwards they're walking home back to Davy's house. And we just see them walking here. Beside us, cars crawled towards the roundabout. It was easy to distinguish the blissed out country fans who'd been to the gig from the unfortunates caught in the traffic. Up ahead, in the front seats of a Mark I silver Audi TT, a couple embraced passionately, a woman in the driving seat, the dark-haired passenger's elbow around her neck, pulling her ever closer to him. I recognised the car as belonging to Mandy Breslin, finance and trust partner at MLC, the law firm where I work. There had been a recall of those cars to have a rear spoiler fitted after they'd been found to be unstable at high speeds on the Autobahn. Most people had opted for the spoiler. She hadn't. She said that she liked the TT the way it was. I glanced at Davy, but he was typing something on his phone. As we passed by, I waved, but Mandy didn't reciprocate, and her face, when she saw me, was a picture. Understandable. I didn't know who the dark-haired man was, but he wasn't her husband. So I'll leave it there for the moment.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And the mystery kicks off. And I have to say that there are so many brilliant twists and turns in this book. I want to ask you how you went about plotting it, because it's so intricately plotted, and from one page to the next, I just couldn't stop reading. So how did you go about plotting this?
I suppose I didn't really plot. I mean, I plotted as I went along, but I started off that long rambling kind of opening sentence about Finn looking down. That was the first thing that came to me, and warning people to watch out for danger in Cork. That was the first thing that came to me, and that sentence was in my head. It was originally one long sentence, and I broke it up into a few sentences. It was in my head for a long time as I was walking around, which I do all the time. And then from that, actually, that isn't quite true. The first thing that came to me was the vision of Finn waiting for Davy, them going to the Marquee, and then Finn seeing something on the way home that she shouldn't have, or that would cause trouble later. And I knew that she would see somebody from work, and I knew kind of who that person was, but I didn't know much more. And then the sentence came to me, and then I just left it for quite a while because I was doing edits on my first book. And then I came back to it afterwards, and I just started writing from the initial scenes, and then I kind of knew who died, and then it was only kind of later that I knew why. So I don't really know how I did it. It's just I just did it. I did sort of, as the story was kind of up and running, I did kind of plot then. Once I knew kind of who the characters were, but I didn't do it from before I started.
it reads so fluidly, but I know that very fluid reading means that it has been a lot of hard work on the part of the writer. Finn Fitzpatrick, we met her in your first novel, Darkest Truth, and it was fantastic as a reader to meet her again here. Did you find as the writer that she revealed anything new of her character to you while you were writing Cruel Deeds?
Character is shown through action and through the things that happen. And I suppose new things happen to Finn, very challenging, really challenging things happen to her. So I suppose, yes, I learned more about her, and I hope the reader will learn more about her through this as well. But also, I don't think you have to have read part one or, you know, Darkest Truth to have read this book. I think it's intended that you know enough about her to get up and running very fast with who she is, and hopefully the story is engaging enough that, you know, the previous history is kind of referred to enough to kind of give you enough to be going on with. But this is just, but yeah, I suppose it just comes through the new and really challenging things that happen to her, and that she, to an extent, seeks out herself as well. You know, she doesn't pull back from the challenge, and she doesn't pull back from the danger that she gets herself into.
Speaking of the danger that she gets herself into and the challenges, and there are some absolutely stunningly written, very dark scenes in the novel. And I found myself thinking, how do you manage to put those out of your head after writing them and go about the rest of your day when you've written a particularly dark scene?
Well, I suppose, like, I suppose I'm when I'm walking in and out to work, or I'm walking around town, and, you know, I am thinking about the book, you know, but when I'm at work, I just have to be at work, you know, because there's always plenty to keep me going there, I can assure you. But it's, I mean, I was writing a lot of this during the pandemic, so I didn't have too much else to think about. It was a relief to be doing this and to be completely caught up in this and not thinking about COVID. So that was it for me. I was just in a world where face masks didn't exist and any of that. But I do think that perhaps some of the sense of dread does come into the book.
It is wonderfully dark in parts. Without giving any spoilers, okay, if you could just talk a little bit about the Finn and Davy relationship, which I love, and for the reader, we're wondering how that's going to play out. Do you know in your head, and I'm not asking you to tell us, but do you know in your head how those two are going to ultimately get on or end up down the road?
I don't really. I have some ideas, but I haven't written it yet, so I don't really. But I know that we haven't seen the last of Davy anyway. You know, he'll be back again, you know. So that's for sure. And a lot of the characters from the book will be back in book 3, which I'm trying to write at the moment.
Was there a particular property that you can recall at some point as sparking the house that is the murder scene in Cruel Deeds?
I don't know, because the house is a derelict house, and you don't really have to look too far to find dereliction in Cork. The street it's on is made up, but there are many streets like that, and there's a lot of falling down houses around the place. So I found it very easy to imagine that house, you know. I suppose, yeah, I know those houses anyway, those kind of mid-century or maybe a bit earlier than that those houses, you know, they're all kind of similar. and certainly from being in college in Cork, I've been in loads of them, you know, so I just made this one a bit more falling down.
And Cork is present throughout the novel, and it's so beautifully written into the fabric of the book. And there's this really gorgeous piece about an otter. Do you walk the city a lot? Because there's a lovely feel for the city.
Oh, I walk the city all the time. I mean, I walk in and out to work. And for example, if anyone's complaining that I say the footpaths are dirtier than they really are that dirty, because I see them, you know, in the mornings, not so much now because of the pubs being closed, but you do see all kinds of things on the footpaths. And especially when you're in early before anything's cleaned. And so there is this sense of this other life going on all the time that we don't see because we're at home watching telly and, you know, going to bed because we have to get up early in the morning. But there are all kinds of other lives going on in the city that we're not aware of. And I'm kind of aware of it as I'm walking around because I use my car only rarely, and I try and walk as much as I can. So yeah, so the city just seeps into you, and it's really beautiful. But I don't think it's given enough credit by the powers that be for how beautiful it is and how much kindness we should show towards it, you know.
I totally agree with you about Cork City, and you have beautiful scenes with Rebecca in the Farm Gate Cafe in the English Market, and for example, buying a certain type of delicious bread in ABC downstairs in the English Market, and of course going to the Dolly Parton concert. Your character walks there also, and I happen to know that you actually really like Dolly Parton yourself.
I am a big Dolly fan.
Yes, and many people may not know this, but as well as being a solicitor and a writer with this second book, Catherine, you're quite a good singer as well. You can sing Dolly Parton, can't you?
I can.
What's your favorite Dolly Parton song?
Oh, Coat of Many Colors. Yeah, it's one of my favorite songs of all time. Yeah, it's a fantastic song.
What I wanted to ask you is one thing that kind of fascinated me about this, because funnily enough, both myself and Danielle are ex-solicitors, but we don't practice anymore. I haven't practiced for a very long time, but I did in England and in Ireland. And in general, I mean, the legalese, let's say, of the novel is really, I'd imagine, very, very interesting for a reader to be to see the background of how a medium-sized law firm functions and all of the different people involved in it.
I don't work in that kind of a firm, by the way. I work in a small, very traditional firm. So I was kind of imagining, I kind of scaled up. I've scaled up the office because I think having a lot more people working in a place means that there are a lot more kind of possibilities for drama and confusion and, you know, all of that.
You have a bigger cast of characters.
Exactly, yeah.
Fuddle us with in terms of red herrings and
that's the idea, yeah.
Who could possibly have done it? So that was a great idea. I'm going to ask you about the structure of the book, because the structure of Darkest Truth, your first crime novel, also featuring Finn, it's got about 400 pages. It's got a prologue. It's written in the first person past tense. And also Cruel Deeds is pretty much the same size, the same structure, short chapters, a prologue. And I don't know anything about this. I'm just wondering, is this required of you? Is this something that your agent, publisher, etc. want you to do, or did this just happen to turn out to be exactly this, you've baked the same size cake, as it were?
Yeah, okay, so the way the book is structured is entirely my decision. It's pretty much the way I wrote it. That's just this, but I suppose the size of the book, in terms of the length of the book, people have an expectation that a book will be 90 or 100,000 words, and I think that's probably what the book is. I don't actually know the exact number of words, I can't remember now, but it's about the size of a typical crime novel. Some of them would be longer, and some of them would be shorter, but if you're going to buy a book for diversion and entertainment, you want it to last you a certain amount of time. So that's why I suppose it's that length. But in terms of the short chapters, the prologue and all of that, and the first person narrative, that's just the way it came out. A lot of crime novels have alternating narrators, alternating timelines, things like that. That's something I haven't done yet, but I might at some stage. But that's the Finn books have just come out like that. And I like the short chapters because it means I see them all as scenes, and if I'm changing if changing a scene, then I finish the chapter, and I try and make sure that people will want to read on at the end of the chapter, that there's always something left, kind of a question you want answered to move on. But then I often don't give you the answer until much later. Yeah, because I obviously have to punish the reader and torture them and make them want to know what's happening. And I mean, I suppose I'm thinking of myself as well, as a reader, because I do read a lot of crime, and so I kind of know, and I also know if I'm feeling bored myself, then it's time to kind of mix it up a bit, change the record or something.
And because this was your second book and you presumably had a deadline, did you find this more difficult than the first book? I mean, did you have a kind of that difficult second album kind of syndrome, where did you find it anxiety inducing, or did you feel that once you'd written one Finn Fitzpatrick book and she was a firmly established character in your head, along with Davy and her friend, the
Sadie,
Sadie, and her job and the setting, that you could just fly through it?
No, I couldn't fly through it. I didn't fly through it. It was very hard again. First book was very hard, but I had this little mantra that I kept saying to myself during the hard times. I've done it before, I can do it again. There were parts of it where I kind of thought, why is this happening? And I didn't know how it tied up. But it does tie up, because it just seems to kind of fit together then finally, well, with a lot of hard work.
And Catherine, what is the nature of your editing process? Produce the entire first draft to your agent or the editors at your publishers, or how does all that work? Or do you in fact involve yourself in much in terms of feedback from other writers? Or
so I think what I've done is I've especially at the beginning, to see if there's enough to get people interested from the beginning, I've definitely shared kind of the first 3 or 4 chapters with friends, just to see whether they're interested, in it, or whether they're whether they're grabbed by it, because it's when you start off, it's just like, am I completely going down the wrong track here? So I've done that, and then I don't go near them until the book is finished again, and then I would give it to friends to read. What I have done as well with say maybe the first third of the book, I've sent it to, maybe even less actually, I've sent it to my agent Luigi for him to take a look at, and he's just very encouraging and says, yes, go on, yeah, you know, keep doing this, and but maybe with one or two suggestions, and then wouldn't go near him again until the very end. And then he would read it, and other people in the I was going to say practice, I don't know what it is, agency, I suppose, would read it, and then they would come back with comments to me. And so before it would be sent to the editor, they would have given me some feedback, and then it would go to the editor, and the editor would then come back with feedback. But there wasn't really a whole pile to be done to this book, you know. It was pretty okay. You know, there was just a few little bits to be added in. Could we know a little bit more about this? Could you give us a bit more detail on that? And that was kind of, there was no real kind of chopping, changing structural thing. The book is pretty much some additional color and details, you know, some background, but nothing. It was pretty well there. I had plenty of time though because of the pandemic, and I had much more time than I would normally have, because we were, during the pandemic, we were working shorter days, and I was going nowhere, seeing no one. So I was hanging out a lot of the time with Finn, you know, and doing yoga with Adrian. Finn and Adrian got me through the pandemic.
Wonderful, because in some cases it can work in the opposite way, in that you have plenty of time, but the anxiety and the isolation for some people can be really, really difficult.
I'm sure there was times when I didn't write a word as well, because the anxiety was terrible, especially at the beginning. Oh my God, it was just absolutely awful. But then you kind of get used to it, don't you? You know.
I suppose you do. And Catherine, can I ask you, do you find that there's a really healthy crop of Irish female crime fiction writers in Ireland at the moment? It seems to me that there are a lot of women writing crime, maybe not, but it seems to me there's a lot of talent out there, and I'm wondering, do you agree? And if so,
I think there is.
think that might be, what is it about Irish women writers?
Well, Liz Nugent has written a piece, I think, for Crime Reads about why there are so many Irish women crime writers. And she says it's because of our experience as Irish women and the kind of gothic horror stories that that we've lived through and that we're aware of, the Magdalene Laundries and, the Kerry Babies and all these stories that you couldn't possibly believe would be true, except they are, and that we kind of know this deep down into our bones. So if anybody hasn't read that piece, I'm sure I think it's for Crime Reads she wrote it, and it's definitely worth Googling if you haven't read it. And of course, she's a brilliant writer. Then there's Catherine Reinhardt from Cork, who's just fantastic. And she's kind of, she seems to know everything about crime writing, as far as I can see. She's just a real expert on the business and the whole. She teaches as well, structure and so on and so forth. She's done a real deep dive into the whole thing, and of course she writes brilliant books. Jane Casey, I am a huge fan of Jane Casey. She's just a wonderful writer. She's based in London, and her lead protagonist is Maeve Kerrigan, and if anybody hasn't read those books and they're interested in crime writing, I couldn't recommend them more highly. Then there's, you know, what I always think about crime writing as well, or what I often think about crime writing is, you know, there's literary fiction, which I consider to be another genre, and then there's the crime genre. But I think with the crime genre, very often you're finding, because there's an immediacy to it, you're finding out what it's like to live at a time and in a place, kind of incidentally to the plot. You know, all those details are woven into it. And so, like, Patricia Gibney is a writer from the Midlands, County Westmeath, Mullingar, but she has a fictional town called Ragmullen, with her Lottie Parker, her Garda detective. And I kind of think if anybody wants to find out what it's like to live in a kind of mid-sized town in Ireland at this time, just go and read the Lottie Parker books, because, okay, there's a very high murder rate, unfortunately, but when with Lottie there, it's always going to be solved. But like, you know, they're really, really good and really well plotted. You know, then there's like Andrea Carter, Andrea Mara. Andrea Carter does the Inishowen books. I know you're a fan of those, Madeline. Andrea Mara then has she has recently done this book, All Her Fault, which is kind of a domestic kind of mystery thriller. Sam Blake is the #1, I think, at the moment. She's Vanessa Fox O'Loughlin, and she has standalones and a series as well. And of course, she's just a stalwart of the scene as well. Did I forget anyone? I mean, Joe Spain, of course. You know, I mean, don't forget Joe Spain. I mean, like, look, there's loads of them, Madeline. You're right. There's loads. I'm sorry if I've forgotten anyone, but I know. I've
read most of, I think, all of the people's work that you've mentioned, and it is wonderful to see. And there's no worries about leaving people out, because, you know, you can't possibly mention all of the crime writers that you admire. But having said that, there are also wonderful male and female crime writers in the past. How about the classic crime writers?
Okay.
Tell me, who's your favorite classic crime writer from
the old days?
From the old days, a blast from the past.
The olden days. Well, I mean, obviously everybody loves Agatha Christie, and I read like loads and loads of those. I don't know if I read all of them, but I'd say I probably have, you know, because they would have been in the library, and you know, I have a lot of them, and I've certainly read loads of them. You just pick them up and they're just always brilliant. I love P.D. James, that world, that creation of a world. She's really wonderful at doing this kind of quiet kind of world building. And she always says this thing about privacy. It's in all of the books. Privacy goes when there's a murder, because then there's delving into all of the background. Ruth Rendell is wonderful. And then there's all the kind of the people who've been writing for years, and who up until very recently are still writing, like John le Carré, Ian Rankin, who's been, you know, I've been reading those books for, I don't know, 30 years, I suppose. Has Rebus been around that long? I think he has. I've been reading John le Carré since I was a teenager, and unfortunately he's dead just recently, but they're just a huge treasure trove, even though they're espionage, but still there's lots of carry through, I think. Yeah, I don't know if there's, I mean, there's loads. I love Dennis Lehane. He's a contemporary writer, but he, you know, writes, and of course, don't forget John Connolly. He's the kind of, he's been writing again since, I think, the 90s. I've been reading those books since then. And there's a kind of horror, kind of gothic element to them as well. But he's a fantastic writer.
And of course, there's Raymond Chandler.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But
a lot of those are hard to read now, though, because of the sexism and the racism and the misogyny and all the rest of it, you know, but the writing is incredible. You know, he's just an amazing stylist. Yeah.
But I think, you know, they're of their time. And I suppose
that's
one of the interesting things about writing crime, because you have the whole, you know, obviously a crime is committed, but it's the setting and the situations within that are really, really interesting, as well as, you know, that whole voyage that you're bringing your reader along. You know, there's always the carrot dangling and the red herrings floating, and the joy of trying to guess who really done it. Can I ask you, Catherine, what's your plan now? I think you mentioned to Danielle that you're writing a third Finn Fitzpatrick novel.
I am. I'm writing it at the moment, and so lots of distractions, I suppose, at the moment with the upcoming publication, and but so that's going on at the moment. That other book, I don't have a proper title, or I don't have a proper, you know, it's not anywhere near finished. So, but at the same time, it is underway.
Will Finn Fitzpatrick travel outside of Cork City, do you think? Or is she?
Well, she always does travel. Well, she has in the last two books. She hasn't stayed entirely in Cork during the you know, she leaves Cork temporarily, but she always comes back. But yeah, I mean, maybe she will. I don't know. Yeah, she might go somewhere else, but I think she's kind of bound up with the city. So I'd be surprised if she left forever, you know.
Oh, I hope not.
Yeah.
Very, very best of luck with that, Catherine. It is hard work too, and it's you know, takes time, but that's something new to look forward to. But in the meantime, Cruel Deeds is the one we're going to be focusing on, and it's got a lovely cover as well. I love the white picket fence. You can see it with my screen.
I think we're sadly out of time, even though we do have loads more questions, because we could keep talking forever, I think, to Catherine. So thanks so much for being generous with your time with us today, Catherine. And it's a fantastic book. Congratulations. Highly recommend Cruel Deeds.
Thank you so much, Madeleine and Danielle. I really appreciate you asking me along, and I really look forward to being back in the Friary in February.
It's been totally our pleasure, Catherine, and it will be fantastic to be back in the Friary Bar from the end of next month. We have a raffle happening online today, so if you go to our Twitter page at Fiction Friary or our Facebook page Fiction at the Friary, you'll see details of how to take part in that free online book raffle. And that's all for us for today. So our thanks again to Catherine Kirwan. Cruel Deeds is published by Hachette Ireland, and highly recommend getting yourself a copy. And that's goodbye from us.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you, Danielle. And we'll see you all again soon, we hope.